Hello, I'm Dan Yergin, Vice Chairman of IHS Markit, and I want to welcome you to the concluding conversation of Houston's Climate Week and the launch of the implementation of Houston's Climate Action Plan. We're very privileged today to be talking with the man responsible for Climate Week and for the Climate Action Plan, Mayor Sylvester Turner. Mayor Turner is in his second term as mayor. He's met many challenges during his years as mayor, and of course is dealing with this very long-running and this tragic COVID-19 crisis. But at the same time, he's kept his long-term perspective on Houston's future and what is required to be and continue to be the energy capital of the world in the 21st century. I'm also very pleased to be joined by Dave Lawler, who is the chief executive of BPX Energy, which is the U.S. onshore company of BP. And in addition, in May, he became the president and chairman of BP America, which is the largest energy investor in the United States. Congratulations, Dave, on taking that post. And the reason Dave is here is because BP is the strategic partner and technical advisor to Houston's Climate Action Plan. I had looked forward to being with both you, Mayor Turner, and you, Dave, at CERAWeek in Houston several months ago, but because of COVID-19, that didn't happen. But I'm very pleased that we can be here today for this very important conversation that brings Climate Week to its conclusion. We'll get to the Climate Action Plan, its rationale, the partnership. First, I want to do a little bit of scene setting. And let me begin with you, Mr. Mayor. We're at the third anniversary of our Hurricane Harvey, which so devastated Houston. I wanted to take you back, 3 years have passed, and ask you, what was it like leading Houston during that crisis?
But then first, let me just say it's good to be with you again. And Dave, it's good to be with you as well. And it's been an exciting week already. And so we're coming to the culmination of Climate Week. And I can't thank you both for taking your time and to be a part of this initial Climate Week for the city of Houston. Look, let me tell you, when I came into office the year before I came in, we faced a 500-year flood in the city of Houston, the Memorial Day flood. And then 4 months into office, I faced the Tax Day flood, the second 500-year storm. And then the following year was the big one, Hurricane Harvey. More rain fell on this city than any other city in the United States in its history. We watched it carefully as it developed. We thought it had passed us, and then it circled back and just kept dropping a lot of water. So it was one of those experiences that you don't want to see, you don't want to have repeated. It was a game changer, for the city of Houston, the energy capital of the world. And as a result, primarily of Hurricane Harvey, recognizing that we had to do some things differently, we are now here talking about Houston's first ever climate action plan. But let me tell you, everyone was impacted. Harvey was an equal opportunity weather abuser. And it didn't matter whether you lived in the affluent side of Houston or in affluent neighborhoods or in low-income neighborhoods. Didn't matter with your ethnicity or your political persuasion. It didn't matter whether you were a homeowner or a business or a corporation. Everyone was impacted by Hurricane Harvey.
So, Mr. Mayor, how did your thinking then evolve about the focus on resilience for the city in the 3 years since then?
Well, we had some answers, some questions we had to answer. Do we build back to the way we were, or do we build forward? Do we try to replace what we lost, or do we make sure that we do it in a smart way and build a stronger, more resilient, and more sustainable Houston? Do you want to continue to be competitive and you don't want companies and others to flee from your city? Or do you want to demonstrate that we are smarter, that we recognize that these storms are coming with greater frequency and with greater intensity? And it's not just a Houston deal, it's a global deal. Climate change is a global challenge. And so we needed a global response. And that was the reason why we came forward with the Climate Action Plan. Look, we changed ordinances where people had to build higher to mitigate flooding. We put in place more detention. We put in place green stormwater infrastructure. But the reality, Dan, Dave, is that we discovered you can't build your way out of it, okay? Unless you take some preventive measures. And this is the energy capital of the world. And we want to remain the energy capital of the world. We needed, quite frankly, a transformative response. And we needed our key players to be at the table right along with us. And hence, I want to give a lot of credit to my team, Laura Cottenham, Tina Pius, the Office of Sustainability, in working with a lot of community groups, community partners, working with our businesses to come up with the city's first ever climate action plan, which was introduced during Earth Day. And now we're talking about it in a virtual way because we're in the midst of this pandemic.
Let's continue the scene setting and turn to Dave. BP for roughly 112 years has been known as an oil and gas company. In recent years, it was known as an IOC, an international oil company. But today, it's now dubbed itself in the last few months an IEC, an integrated energy company. What does that mean and why is it happening?
No, it's a great question, Dan. Thank you. I think for BP as a company that has historically been solely in the oil and gas business, this is quite a time of transition. But what it does reflect is that we are listening to society. We do understand that there are changes in consumer preferences. And so what we're really trying to do at this point is transition the company into a diversified energy company, an integrated energy company. And what we mean by that is that while oil and gas will still be an important part of the portfolio, it will be a much smaller part of the portfolio going forward. So at this point, we'll start investing greater amounts of capital into low carbon businesses. So at this point, we spend maybe 500 million or so on low carbon businesses. We're going to increase that amount to about 5 billion. We'll decrease our oil and gas production by 40% or almost 1 million barrels. So I think the read through for society is that BP is very serious about this change, and we are going to pursue these businesses that frankly society expects, and we want to be a force for good, providing an environment that is clean for everyone.
So, Dave, I know that one of the focuses of this pivot or shift of BP is to partner with cities. And of course, the most notable example of that is what we're talking about today, the partnership with Houston. And I wanted to ask Mr. Mayor and Dave, from each of your perspectives, how did this partnership come about?
You know, years ago, it would have been unlikely for a oil company, for example, to publicly partner with a city and talking about reducing carbon emissions. Okay, quite frankly, let me tell you, it would have been difficult years ago for the mayor of the city of Houston, the energy capital of the world, to talk about a climate action plan or decarbonizing your economy. But the reality is that Harvey has been a game changer for everybody. And quite frankly, as we put forth the climate action plan, we needed to work with other partners. And let me just explain to you why. There is no federal or state mandate that talks about reducing emissions, and unlike, for example, in California or New York, that doesn't exist here in the state of Texas. And then secondly, we don't have a city-owned utility like in Austin or in San Antonio. And so in order for us to achieve the goals and the objectives, meaningful goals and objectives as it relates to climate action, we needed to partner it needed to be a public-private initiative. Otherwise, we would not meet the aggressive goals that we wanted to see achieved. And then I am so appreciative for BP for reaching out to the city of Houston and said, look, we want to partner with the city of Houston. BP was putting forth its own climate action plan. And in listening today, when you talk about mobility, when you talk about electrifying, those are things that are quite consistent with what the city of Houston was seeking to do. Now, in 2005, We started, for example, reducing greenhouse gas emissions with respect to municipal facilities, and we reduced it by 37%. And then as of today, the city of Houston is powered 100% by renewables. But those are municipal facilities. We're talking about the city of Houston as a whole. And we have some of the largest gas emitters right here in the city of Houston. If we can partner with them, invite them to the table, and hopefully they will come to the table, then we can have an impact not just on the city of Houston, but it can be globally. I want to thank BP for voluntarily agreeing to come to the table, to join with us, to partner with us in a meaningful way. And so they have come. They're offering technical assistance, experts. I want to thank them for the generous gift of the grant of $2 million, unrestricted, I might add. But it will help us in the staffing that we need to come up, for example, with a climate action equity partner, coordinator, so that we don't leave out vulnerable communities. And so it is that public-private collaboration that BP brings to the table, not to obstruct, not to stand in the way, but to help us to fulfill our goals and objectives. And quite frankly, hopefully the goal is to do it much, much sooner than 2050, to do it sooner. And we can do it if we partner together.
Dave, BP has stepped forward to be the major partner for the Climate Action Plan. How did it come about, and how's it going to work?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The what we've seen in the mayor's leadership is that he has a challenge in front of him, just like BP does, and how to lower the carbon emissions of the city. We've noticed his leadership, and we want to support that leadership. And part of our ambition is to create a team, which we've done, which will support cities and provide solutions to cities to help lower carbon emissions. And so, knowing what his leadership was, what his plans were, BP reached out and asked if we could be in a position to support him and the city. And so that's what we've done. And as we go forward, we'll have a seat at the table along with many others to try to provide solutions and create an innovative environment in which the mayor can be successful to decarbonize the city.
So BP as a company has made a focus on cities as a particular group that you want to work with.
Yes, absolutely. So we have 10 aims, Dan, and the first five aims have to do with decreasing our methane intensity, lowering our carbon so we can achieve net zero by 2050 or sooner. But the other half of our aims have to do with policy and creating teams that can go in and work with cities to help them achieve their objectives. I think what BP has realized is that not only do we need to improve our own business, but we all need to work together as a society in order to achieve the goals of the Paris Accord.
So you've talked about the partnership, how it will work. Mr. Mayor, let's turn to the implementing the climate action plan itself. What do you see as the overarching goal and the major elements?
Well, for me, Dan, it is not, it's, we are the energy capital of the world. And just like you and I have had conversations in the past, it's about energy transition. Bobby Tudor, who is the chairman of the Greatest Houston Partnership, which is like our chamber, has talked about the importance of energy and the transition, the evolution of energy in our city and quite frankly, globally. And and you can't, we talk about the city of Houston being the energy capital, but the question is, how do you continue to be? And so it's not about defending a title, it's about leading the way. And so innovation is important, providing additional options, not just focusing on oil and gas, but we're talking about renewables, and we're talking about bringing in that innovation that will drive and have positive impacts on our environment as well as on our economy. That's important. Look, Houston and energy are inextricably connected, and I'm proud of that history. I mean, we were the ones when it came to the evolution of all, the finding of all more than a century ago. It was right here in Houston, Spindletop in 1901. When it comes to innovation and going into space, for example, landing on the moon in the 1960s, that was Houston. Okay, the Houston, the world's largest medical center, but energy and the and science, those things are inextricably connected in the city of Houston. And so now the question is, what steps must we take to help to reduce the frequency and the intensity of these storms? How do we protect vulnerable populations in our city and put them in the best position to enjoy their quality of life, to save lives, to save money? And so the partnership between, for example, the city of Houston, community groups of people coming from all areas, bringing the stakeholders together, working with a company like BP, that will help the city of Houston to come forth and not only to devise the climate action plan, and we've done that, but to implement the goals and the objectives of the climate action plan that will be real, impactful, and substantive. And that's what we're seeking. And that's why I value not just the relationship with BP, but I hope that there will be other BPs that will be coming to the table as a result of the leadership that BP has taken.
Well, I will come back to that last point in just a second, but let me ask you, you're both very practical men, and things don't always go exactly as you want them to do. What do you see as the main challenges in terms of implementation? Mr. Mayor, speaking from the viewpoint of the city, and Dave, bringing the global perspective that BP has as a global company.
Well, quite frankly, the devising of the climate action plan was the easy part. The implementation, the execution, that's where the work really begins. I mean, we've set some goals. In 2050, for example, I mean, that's 30 years away. And the question is, if we bring the various stakeholders and partners and the emitters to the table, I think we can achieve many of these goals prior to 2050. Um, Look, this has always been a cost-centric sort of city, and now we're talking about doing things that can more with mass transit, multiple options of transit options. We're talking about electrifying all the renewables that we're talking about, wind and solar. Quite frankly, we need our partners, and so from my vantage point is that we have no choice but to move with the greatest degree of urgency in order to put in place and build a city that will be stronger, more resilient, more sustainable, and one that will be very sensitive to our vulnerable populations that live within our city. In order to achieve meaningful objectives, we'll need the community workers, the activists, the advocates, people who are strongly supportive of the environment. We'll need them at the table, okay? And we'll need to listen. But we'll also need to bring the companies and the corporations to the table as well, because in the absence of them being at the table, we're not going to achieve meaningful global results. And so that's one of the challenges, bringing people to the table, okay? And then having what I call good, honest dialogue, and with people committed to making meaningful, positive change, seeking to find the win-win and not the win-lose. And that's what I'm interested in doing, finding the win-win such that at the end of the day, persons who are living in communities that have been underserved and under-resourced, that are constantly impacted by a Hurricane Harvey or the tax day flood or this pandemic, and they're on the margins of life, will also benefit from a BP being at the table, providing their strategic planning, technical assistance, resources, okay? And at the end of the day, we all benefit such that we can save this planet and keep it around for generations to come.
Mr. Mayor, your talent for bringing people to the table and dialogue is one of the reasons you're a great leader. And certainly you're applying those skills here, and that will have very big impact. And I think we all can learn from how you go about doing things. So
Thanks,
thank
Dan.
you for that answer. Dave, BP, people may not know it. The mayor just talked about people think oil and gas companies. BP is one of the major players in wind. It's a major player in trading electricity. You mentioned charging and biofuels. When you think about these issues of implementation, could you share just a kind of global perspective of what you see as the challenges?
I think I would just echo what the mayor said, and that it's going to take a lot of people at the table in order to achieve the outcomes that we want in terms of climate change. I think the challenges themselves will reside in there's an interface between government policy, so BP will be more vocal in supporting the policies that are needed to support climate initiatives. We're going to have challenges in terms of thinking about only my business. We're going to have to reach different groups, different companies in order to secure the alignment that's going to be needed to effectuate positive and real changes. Like the mayor said, that people do want to see results at this point. So I think the challenges will be many, but starting with the policies themselves, I think that's an area where we can focus and play strong in the advocacy space. But then also reaching out and partnering with leaders like the mayor that want to make a difference. I think this is how we build a strong coalition. And then once we achieve momentum, and by the way, I think that we are, not only as an industry, but also across the globe, what we're seeing is communities, governments, businesses are looking to achieve the same thing. So I think that continual cooperation will be the key in moving us forward.
You talked about the partnership, of course, between the city and the business community and its engagement. And Mr. Mayor talked about maintaining Houston's position as an energy capital of the world in a different kind of world. And one of the focuses that you put on it is the city as a center of innovation. And that's part of, I think, what the climate action plan has is to make sure that this is that you foster innovation. And I'd like to hear your perspective on that, and then Dave's. I mean, where is Houston as an innovation city?
Well, innovation is who we are, Dan. And I don't want to sound braggadocious, but innovation is who we are. We would not be the energy capital of the world without it. We would not have the largest medical center without it. We would not have led this planet to the moon, to space, without innovation. Um, with regards to the discovery of oil more than a century ago, that was being innovative. So it is who we are. In the climate action plan, you will see that it talks about creating 50 new energy 2.0 companies by 2025. We won't do that without innovation. And we're working, for example, with various entities, the Rice University Carbon Hub, the University of Houston Carbon Management Program, the ION Smart and Resilient Cities Incubator, Houston Exponential, which is nothing but innovation, the Greentown Labs Houston, all of those things, all are all partners. Even during CERAWeek, Dan, when bringing companies from all over the world, we have integrated into CERAWeek a key component, and that's talking about innovation. Okay. So we recognize that as we move forward, as we evolutionize, that we are not going to achieve the objectives called for by the Climate Action Plan without innovation. I want to echo what Dave too said, and that is, look, we all know this is not going to be easy. But quite frankly, when there are two major weather systems that are approaching Houston, for example, all at the same time, in the midst of a pandemic and a heat wave, we don't have a choice. And I think challenges bring about opportunities, and opportunities create innovation. And we have the expertise, the intellectual capital. We have advocates who are strongly committed. We have people like companies like BP and that are willing to come to the table. When you put all that together, I think from that, I think you will find we will come up with creative, innovative ways of achieving the objectives of the climate action plan. And my hope is a lot sooner than what we have put forth.
Dave, BP has always had a big presence in Houston and Texas. Under you, it's really increased 2 years ago, its footprint very substantially, but it is a global company, but its US headquarters is Houston. With the perspective that you have from a company that's basically based on science and engineering, how do you see Houston as an innovation ecosystem when you look around the world?
The way that I would characterize it is that a society comes together with governments, with communities, with individual corporations. This interchange of information is what's going to be needed in order to achieve the objective of the Paris Accord. And there's no better example than BP stepping out and investing in solar companies. And the example that I would give you is that Lightsource BP has won a contract with a foundry that produces steel in Colorado. And if someone would have thought that a steel mill would be powered by solar power, is just something that's completely unthinkable. And so we're going to take different industries, stitch them together. We're going to take different technologies, stitch them together. And then we're going to work with government leaders, communities, in order to be a force for good in the world.
Dave, let me ask you a question that follows from what the mayor said a little while ago about bringing people to the table. Your BP's at the table. How do you see the Houston business community responding to this? What is the response among the other businesses that you know?
Dan, I think it's overwhelming. I think that, as you know, Houston is a major center for an assortment of businesses to a T, whether it's banking or medical or energy or space. The commitment to improvement is out there. And I think under the mayor's leadership, that's where everyone can come together. So I think they're going to respond in a very positive way. The key will just be that we want to make sure we bring everyone along, make sure everybody has a say, but that we also don't deviate from the path that we're on. And I don't think the mayor's going to let that happen.
Well, the path you're on, as the mayor said, leads to 2050. Maybe it leads, as the mayor said, sooner than 2050. And the final question, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask you, when the people of, what do you want people in the year 2050, Houstonians, to say about the city and the companies in it, and what the people of Houston did in 2020 to really build for the future?
Look, let me tell you, when I sit here today in this seat as the mayor of the fourth largest city, coming from one of those vulnerable communities that I've talked about, I am very grateful to those before me who paved the way to afford me the opportunity to come from a household where neither parent graduated from high school. A mom was a maid rearing 9 kids by herself. But people invested in people like me. And as a consequence of that, I now sit here talking to Dave with BP, talking with you, Dan, as the mayor of the fourth largest city. People gave me an opportunity and they invested and they made my future much brighter. I am hopeful that 30 years from now, people will say the same thing about what I'm saying about people who came before me. That every week now in the city of Houston is Climate Week. That the Climate Action Plan is integrated into every aspect of our daily life and business practices and policies. That based on what they did 30 years ago, we have a cleaner, safer, and more equitable city. That energy is now supportive of our environment in very real and impactful ways. When we walk out, it's cleaner. And kids that are suffering from asthma are in a better city because of the actions that were taken. And it now drives our economy. And lastly, what I hope that they will say, Dan, is that what they did 30 years ago, their actions were the catalyst for the change that have given hope and life for generations to come. And they were brave enough and bold enough, and they didn't stay in their respective corners. But we had working community, environmental advocates, and others sitting at they sat at the table with business and corporate leaders, and they found innovative and creative ways to achieve results that made us all better. It was a win-win, and they created a model that can be used for generations to come. That's what I'm hoping people will say down the road.
Mr. Mayor, you have been and are a great catalyst, and Dave, you're a catalyst in bringing BP to the table. This has been a very important discussion about the roots of the Climate Action Plan of Houston and why we're at Climate Week, going back to Hurricane Harvey, the objectives, how it's going to be achieved, the importance of partnerships, the challenges that need to be overcome, and the benefits that will flow from it. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for this concluding plenary of the Climate Action Week in Houston 2020, and to express our deep appreciation to Mayor Sylvester Turner, of the Mayor of Houston, and to Dave Lawler of BP for joining us for this very important and very insightful conversation. And thank you for joining us as well.